various electoral processes in this country in September. Yes, yes. There is also non-systemic opposition. You have said that some people have been detained, some people are in prison. Yes, that is all true. You mentioned certain names. Yes, yes. I will talk about it. Yes, I will not leave any of your questions unattended. Doesn't matter. Of course not. We don't have this kind of habit of assassinating anybody. That's one. Number two is, I want to ask you, did you order the assassination of the woman who walked into the Congress and who was shot and killed by a policeman? Do you know that 450 individuals were arrested after entering the Congress? And they didn't go there to steal a laptop. They came with political demands. 450 people have been detained. They're looking at jail time between 15 and 25 years, and they came to the Congress with political demands. Isn't that prosecution for political opinions? Some have been accused of plotting to take over government power. Some are accused of robbery. They didn't go there to rob. The people who you have mentioned, yes, they were convicted for violating their status, having been previously convicted, given delayed sentences, which was essentially a warning to not violate any laws. And they completely ignored the requirements of the law. The court went on and passed and turned the conviction into real jail time. Thousands and thousands of people ignore requirements of the law, and they have nothing to do with political activities in Russia every year, and they go to jail. If somebody is actually using political activities as a disguise to deal with their own issues, including achieve their commercial goals, then it's something that they have to be held responsible for.
There you go again, Mr. President. What about America when I've asked you about Russia? Let me ask you, you mentioned Congress. Let me ask you another direct question that you can answer, and it's an allegation that has been made, an accusation that has been made again and again now in the United States. The late John McCain in Congress called you a killer. When President Trump was told that you are a killer, he didn't deny it. When President Biden was asked whether he believes you are a killer, he said, I do. Mr. President, are you a killer?
Послушайте меня.
Look,
Я привык за время своей работы к атакам с разных сторон.
over my tenure, I've gotten used to attacks from all kinds of angles and from all kinds of areas, under all kinds of pretexts and reasons and of different caliber and fierceness, and none of it surprises me. People with whom I work and with whom we argue, we are not bride and groom. We don't swear everlasting love and friendship. We are partners, and in some areas we are rivals or competitors. As far as harsh rhetoric, I think that this is an expression of overall U.S. culture. Of course, in Hollywood, because we mentioned Hollywood at the beginning of our conversation, there are some underlying deep things in Hollywood, macho, which can be treated as cinematographic art, but that is part of U.S. Political culture where it's considered normal. By the way, not here. It is not considered normal here. If this rhetoric is followed by a suggestion to meet and discuss bilateral issues and matters of international policies, I see it as a desire to engage in joint work. If this desire is serious, we're prepared to support it.
I don't think I heard you answer the question, the direct question.
Ответил.
I did answer. I will add, if you let me. I have heard dozens of such accusations, especially during the period of some grave events during our counter-terrorism efforts in North Caucasus. And when it happens, I'm always guided by the interests of the Russian people and Russian state. And sentiments in terms of who calls somebody whom, what kind of labels. This is not something I worry about in the least.
Yeah, let me give you some names. Anna Politkovskaya, shot dead. Alexander Litvinenko, poisoned by polonium. Sergei Magnitsky, allegedly beaten and died in prison. Boris Nemtsov, shot moments from the Kremlin, moments from here. Mikhail Lesin died of blunt trauma in Washington, D.C. Are all of these a coincidence, Mr. President?
Послушайте, но вы
Look,
знаете, что
you know, I don't want to come across as being rude, but this looks like some kind of indigestion, except that it's verbal indigestion. You've mentioned many individuals who indeed suffered and perished at different points in time for various reasons at the hand of different individuals. You mentioned Lesin. Lesin used to work in my administration. I liked him very much. He died, he perished or died in the United States. I'm not sure if he perished or died, but we should ask you how exactly he perished. I regret to this day that he left us. In my opinion, he's a very decent, a very good person. As far as the others, we found some of the criminals who committed those crimes. Some are in prison, and we're prepared to continue to work in this mode and along this avenue, identifying everybody who violate the law and by their actions cause damage, including to the image of the Russian Federation. However, just throw everything out altogether is meaningless, inappropriate, and has no grounds. If one sees it as a line of attack, then very well. Let me listen to it one more time, but I repeat it. I'd like to repeat that I have heard it many times, but this doesn't baffle me. I know which area to move in, which direction to move in to secure the interests of the Russian state.
Let's move on to Belarus and Ukraine, two issues that will certainly come up in your summit with President Biden. Did you have prior knowledge that a commercial airliner would be forced to land in Belarus and that a journalist would be arrested?
нет,
No. No, I did not know about this. I didn't know about any airliner. I didn't know about the people who were detained there. I found out about it from the media. I didn't have a clue about any detainees. I don't know. It is of no interest to us.
You appeared to approve of it, judging by your meeting with President Lukashenko soon afterwards.
Да я не то чтобы одобряю,
Not that I approve of it, not that I condemn it, but, well, it happened. I said recently in one of the conversations with a European colleague, the version that Mr. Lukashenko told me about personally was that information had been given to them that there was an explosive device on board the plane. They informed the pilot without forcing the pilot to land, and the pilot made his own decision. Why should I not believe him? Ask the pilot. It's the simplest thing. Ask the pilot-in-chief. Ask the commander of the aircraft. Did you ask him? Was he forced to land? Because I have not heard or seen any interview with the commander of the aircraft that landed. Why not ask him? Why not ask him if he was forced to land? Why don't you ask him? It's actually even odd. Everybody accuses Lukashenko, but the pilot hasn't been asked. You know, I cannot but recall another similar situation where the plane of the president of Bolivia was forced to land in Vienna at the order of the U.S. administration. Plane number one, presidential plane, was forced to land. The president was taken out of the aircraft. He was searched, and so was the plane, and you don't even recall that. Do you think it was normal?
Wix gives you the freedom to tell your story with a professional website that reflects who you are and what you have to offer. Customize every element of your website to meet your needs and achieve your goals. Create a unique visual experience that enhances your product and amplifies your message. Expand your website with content that pushes your business forward. Share content that matters to your audience. And present it the way you envision it, from the biggest ideas to the smallest details. Your website, your voice, your platform.
Journalists.
Да.
Yes. Look, I will tell you one more time. What President Lukashenko told me, I don't have any reason not to believe him. For the third time, I'm telling you, ask the pilots. Why don't you ask the pilot? Was he being scared? Was he being threatened? Was he being forced? The fact that information appeared that there was a bomb on the plane, that individuals, people who had nothing to do, who were passengers, who had nothing to do with politics or any kind of domestic conflicts, that they could perceive it negatively, could be worried about it. Of course, that's a bad thing. There is nothing good about this, and obviously we condemn everything that has to do with this and international terrorism and the use of aircraft. Of course, we're against this, and you've told me that the landing of the aircraft of the President of Bolivia is a completely different matter. Yes, it is different, except that it is 10 times worse than what was done, if anything was done in Belarus. But you just won't acknowledge it. You are ignoring it, and you want millions of people around the world to either not notice it or forget about it tomorrow. You won't get away with it. It won't happen.
In the case of neighbouring Ukraine, earlier this year, the European Union said you had more than 100,000 troops on the Ukrainian border. Was that an attempt to get Washington's attention?
Послушайте.
Look, first, Ukraine itself constantly, and I think is still doing that, kept bringing personnel and military equipment to the conflict area in the southeast of Ukraine, Donbass. That's one. Two is that we conducted an exercise in our territory, not just in the south of the Russian Federation, but also in the Far East and in the north, in the Arctic. Simultaneously, military exercises were being held in different parts of the Russian Federation. At the same very time, the U.S. was conducting military exercises in Alaska. Do you know anything about it? Probably not. But I'll tell you that I do know, and that is in direct proximity to our borders. But that's in your territory, on your land. We didn't even pay attention to it. What is happening now? Now, at our southern borders, there is a war game, Defender Europe. 40,000 personnel, 15,000 units of military equipment. Part of them have been airlifted from the U.S. continent directly to our borders. Did we airlift any of our military technology to the U.S. borders? No, we did not. Why are you worried then?
But many of those exercises are a response to your actions, Mr. President. Do you worry that your opposition to NATO has actually strengthened it? For 6 years, NATO has spent more on defense.
Ничего себе оборона.
Some defense. During the USSR era, Gorbachev, who is still, thank God, with us, got a promise, a verbal promise, that there would be no NATO expansion to the east. Where is that promise?
Where is that written down? Where is that promise written down?
Да-да-да.
Right. Well done. Correct. You deceived a fool, as they say in this country. You deceived a fool very easily. Of course, everything should be sealed and written on paper. But what was the point of expanding NATO to the east and bringing its infrastructure to our borders? And all of this before saying that we are the ones who have been acting aggressively. Why? On what basis? Was Russia, after the USSR collapsed, presenting any threat to the U.S. or European countries? We voluntarily withdrew our troops from Eastern Europe Our people there, military personnel, for decades lived there in what was not normal conditions, including their children. We went to tremendous expenses, and what did we get in response? We got in response infrastructure next to our borders, and now you're saying that we're threatening to somebody. We're conducting war games on a regular basis, including sometimes military exercises which are unexpected for our armed forces. Why should it worry the NATO partners? I just don't understand that.
Will you commit now not to send any further Russian troops into Ukrainian sovereign territory?
Послушайте меня.
Look, did we say that we were planning to send our armed formations anywhere? We were conducting war games in our territory. How can this not be clear? I'm saying it again because I want your audience to hear it, your listeners to hear it both on the screens of their televisions and on the internet. We conducted military exercises in our territory. Imagine if we sent our troops into direct proximity to your borders. What would have been your response? We didn't do that. We did it in our territory. You conducted war games in Alaska, God bless you. But you had crossed an ocean, brought thousands of personnel, thousands of units of military technology close to our borders, and yet you believe that we are acting aggressively, and somehow you're not acting aggressively. Just look at that. Pot calling the kettle black.
Moving on, the Biden administration has said that at your summit they will bring up the case of 2 US prisoners in Russia, Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed. They are 2 former Marines. Trevor Reed is suffering from COVID in prison. Why don't you release them ahead of the summit? Wouldn't that show goodwill?
Ну, я знаю, что у нас есть.
I know that we have certain U.S. citizens who are in prison, have been convicted, found guilty, but if one considers the number of Russian Federation citizens who are in U.S. prisons, then these numbers don't even compare. They cannot be compared. The United States has made a habit in the last few years of catching Russian Federation citizens in third countries and take them back to the U.S. and put them in prison.
I'm very happy to keep going for another 30
Ладно,
minutes.
значит, здесь я определяю время, поэтому не переживайте.
I determine the time here, so don't worry about time. Your guy, the Marine, he's just a drunkard and a thug. As they say here, he got himself shit-faced and started a fight. He hit a cop. It's nothing. It's just a common crime. There's nothing to it. As far as possible negotiations on this subject, sure, it can be talked about. Obviously, we will raise the matter of our citizens who are in prison, in U.S. prisons. Yes, it can be a specific conversation, sure. We're happy to do it, although it doesn't seem that the U.S. administration has raised that matter, but we're prepared to do that. Our pilot, Yaroshenko, has been in prison in the U.S. for, I don't know how many years, 15, maybe 20 years. And there also, this problem seems to be a common crime. We could and should talk about it. We haven't been talking about this, but we could. If the U.S. side is prepared to discuss it, so are we.
So his family will find that incredibly distressing to hear you talk about him that way. It does sound, though, as if you would consider some kind of a prisoner swap.
Ну, что здесь обидного? Он напился.
There's nothing offensive about it. He got drunk on vodka and started a fight. He fought a cop. There's nothing offensive about it. These things happen in life. There's nothing horrible about it. It happens to our men as well. Somebody gulps down some vodka and starts a fight. So you violate the law, you go to prison. What would have happened if he'd fought a cop, if he'd hit a cop in your country? He would have been shot dead. Isn't that the case?
And on the prisoner swap question, is that something that you would consider? Are you looking to negotiate? You're meeting with the president?
Yes, of course. Even better would be a discussion of the possibility of entering into an agreement on extradition of individuals who are in prison. This is a standard international practice. We have such agreements with several countries. We're prepared to enter into such an agreement with the United States.
Just to be clear, so we hear it from you, which Russian prisoners in the US would you be hoping to bring back to Russia by name?
Ну, там, у нас там
We have a whole list. I've just mentioned a pilot named Yaroshenko, who was taken to the U.S. from a third country and was given a lengthy sentence. He has major health issues, but the administration, in the prison administration, is not paying attention to this. You have mentioned that that U.S. citizen has coronavirus, but nobody's paying attention to the health issues of our citizen. We're prepared to discuss these issues, and as you correctly said, and I completely agree with you, there are matters of humanitarian nature, and why not discuss them as long as they pertain to the health and life of specific individuals and of their families. Of course, sure thing.
Just quickly, before I move on the subject of prisons, again with Alexei Navalny, will you commit that you will personally ensure that Alexei Navalny will leave prison alive?
Послушайте, у нас такие решения.
Look, such decisions in this country are not made by the president. They're made by the court, whether or not to set somebody free. As far as the health, all individuals who are in prison, that is something that the administration of the specific prison or penitentiary establishment is responsible for. And there are medical establishments in penitentiaries that are perhaps not in the best condition, and they are the ones whose responsibility it is, and I hope that they do it properly. But to be honest, I have not visited such places for a long time. When I used to work, when I was in St. Petersburg, I once visited that establishment, and that was a very grave impression that was made on me by the medical establishments in prisons, but things have been done to improve that situation, and I proceed from the premise that the person that you have mentioned, the same kind of measures will apply to that person, not in any worse manner than to anybody else who happens to be in prison.
His name is Alexei Navalny. People will note that you
Да мне всё
weren't
равно.
prepared to say that he
I don't
would
care.
leave prison alive.
Послушайте меня.
Look, please listen to me carefully. His name can be anything. He's one of the individuals who is in prison. For me, he is a citizen of the Russian Federation who has been found guilty by a court of law and is in prison. There are many citizens like that. By the way, our so-called prison population, the people who are in prison, has in the last few years been reduced by almost 50%, which I consider a big victory for our part, and a major sign of our legal system becoming more humane. He will not be treated any worse than anybody else. Nobody should be given any kind of exclusive treatment. Everybody should be in an equal position. This is called the most favored nation treatment, not worse than anybody else. And the person that you have mentioned, that applies to him as well.
I appreciate the extra time, Mr. President. The team has been in quarantine for almost 2 weeks, so this interview is very important to us. I want to ask you about China. China is working on its 4th aircraft carrier. It has 2. Russia has 1, and it's not in service at the moment. China refused to take part in arms control talks last year. You complain so much about NATO to your west. Why do you never complain about China's militarization to your east?
Первое, что хочу сказать, у
The
нас
first thing I want to say is that over the last few years, the last few decades, we have developed a strategic partnership relationship between Russia and China that previously had not been achieved in the history of our nations. A high level of trust and cooperation in all areas, in politics, in the economy, in the area of technology, in the area of military technical cooperation. We do not believe that China constitutes a threat to us. That's one. China is a friendly nation. It has not declared us an enemy, as the United States has done. Don't you know anything about this? That's number one. Number two is that China is a huge, powerful country, 1.5 billion in terms of PPP purchasing power parity. The Chinese economy has exceeded that of the United States. And in terms of trade for the previous year, for last year, China has taken the first place on an equal footing with Europe, whereas the U.S. has been relegated to the second position. Do you know about this? China has been developing, and I understand that what's beginning is a certain kind of confrontation with China. Everybody understands it. We can see it. Why be scared of these issues? However, we're not alarmed by it, including, among other things, by the fact that our defense adequacy, which is how we describe it, is at a very high level, including because of this. But the most important thing is the nature and level of our relationship with China. You said China will have 4 aircraft carriers. How many does the United States have? There you go. That's my point. Why would we worry about the Chinese aircraft carriers? On top of everything else, we have a hugely vast border with China, but it's a land border. It's a land border. What? Do you think the Chinese aircraft carriers will cross our land border? This is just a meaningless conversation. But yes, you're right that there will be 4 of them. It is correct that there will be 4 of them, right. Coast, well, the coast is huge, but the bulk of the border between us and China is a land border. And yes, you're right that there will be 4 of them, because one needs to be in maintenance, one needs to be on combat duty, one needs to be in repairs. There is nothing excessive here for China. That is why what you said, that China won't engage in negotiations, arms control, it refuses to negotiate reductions in offensive weapons. You should ask the Chinese about it, whether it's good or bad. It's for them to decide. But their arguments are simple and understandable. The level, both in terms of the number of ammunition and warheads and delivery vehicles, the United States and Russia are far, far ahead of China. And the Chinese justly say, why would we make reductions if we're already far behind what you have? Or do you want to just freeze our levels of nuclear deterrence? Why should we freeze? Why we, a country with a 1.5 billion population, cannot at least set the goal of achieving your levels? These are all debatable issues that require thorough consideration. But making us responsible for China's position is just comical.
What do you think of China's treatment of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang?
Вы знаете, я встречался
I have met certain Uyghurs. It's always possible to find individuals who criticize the central authorities. I have met Uyghurs on my trips to China, and I assure you, at the very least, what I heard with these very ears of mine, that on the whole they welcome the policies of the Chinese authorities in this area. They believe that China has done a great deal for people who live in this part of the country from the perspective of the economy, raising the cultural level, and so on and so forth. So why should I offer estimates looking at the situation from outside?
You know there are many Uyghurs who do not say that, and that America has accused China of genocide. The Secretary of State has accused China of genocide over the Uyghurs. There is the accusation of 1 million Uyghurs in so-called concentration camps. Is that your message to the Muslim communities in the former Soviet Union? You don't think anything wrong is happening there?
Я посыл мусульманскому сообществу в России должен направлять
As far as the Muslim community in Russia, I need to give a message to it through policies of the Russian authorities vis-à-vis Muslims in the Russian Federation. That is how I need to give my message to the Muslim community in the Russian Federation. We are an observer in the Organization of Islamic Conference. We account for about 10% of our population, probably a little more, Muslims. They are citizens of the Russian Federation who do not have any other nationality. They're making a colossal contribution to the development of our country, and that pertains to both clerics and ordinary citizens. Why should I speak to and build a relationship with this part of our population, basing myself on the situation in China without understanding thoroughly what is happening there? I think that you're better off asking the foreign minister of the Chinese People's Republic or the U.S. State Department.
It's just a question of whether you are prepared to criticize China. China, for example, abstained on Crimea at the Security Council. China's biggest banks have not contravened American sanctions against Russia. Do you think you get 100% support from China?
Вы знаете, мы соседи.
You know, we are neighboring countries. One does not choose one's neighbors. We are pleased with the level, as I said, unprecedentedly high level of our relationship as it has evolved over the last few decades, and we cherish it, just like our Chinese friends cherish it, which we can see. Why are you trying to drag us into some kind of matters that you believe as you see it fit for building your relationship with China? I will tell you completely, can I be completely honest? We can see attempts at destroying the relationship between Russia and China. We can see that those attempts are being made in practical policies. And your questions, too, have to do with it. I have expounded my position to you. I believe that this is sufficient, and I'm confident that the Chinese leadership, being aware of the totality of these matters, including the part of their population who are Uyghurs, will find the necessary solution to make sure that the situation remains stable and benefits the entire multi-million strong Chinese people, including its Uyghur part.
You understand, of course. I'm just trying to question you about Russia's position in relation to China and the United States. Let me ask you in a different way. Are you splitting off from the US space program and moving forward with China?
Да нет, почему? Мы
No,
готовы.
why? We are prepared to work with the U.S. in space, and I think recently the head of NASA said that he could not imagine development of space programs without a partnership with Russia. We welcome this statement, and we value.
Because the head of the Russia Space Agency has threatened leaving the international space.
Whatever you do it for less at Harbor Freight.
In relation to that threat.
Ну, я, честно говоря, не думаю.
Honestly, I don't think that Mr. Rogozin, that is the name of the head of Roscosmos, has threatened anyone in this regard. I've known him for many years, and I know that he is a supporter of expanding the relationship with the U.S. in this area, in space. Recently, the head of NASA spoke in the same vein, and I personally fully support this, and we have been working with great pleasure all of these years, and we're prepared to continue to work. For technical reasons, though, and that's a different matter, is that the International Space Station is coming to an end of its service life, And maybe in this regard, the Roscosmos does not have plans to continue the work. However, based on what I heard from our U.S. partners, is that they too are looking at future cooperation in this particular segment in a certain way. But on the whole, the cooperation between our two countries in space is a great example of a situation where, despite any kind of problems in political relationships, it's an area where we have been able to maintain and preserve the partnership, and both parties cherish it. I think you just misunderstood what the head of the Russian space program said. We are interested in continuing working with the U.S. in this direction, and will continue to do so if our U.S. partners don't refuse to do that. It doesn't mean that we need to localize our work specifically in relation to the U.S. We have been working and will continue to work with China, which applies to all kinds of programs, including exploring deep space, and I think it's positive. Frankly, I don't see any contradictions here. I don't think any mutual exclusivity here.
Let me ask you one more way, just to understand the relationship between China, Russia, and America. If the People's Liberation Army made a move on Taiwan, how would Russia respond to that?
Вам что, разве известно о планах Китая?
What, you know about China's plans to militarily solve the Taiwan problem? I don't know anything about it. As we frequently say, politics do not use the subjunctive mood. There is no could be and would be in politics. I cannot comment on anything that is not a current reality of the modern world. Please bear with me, don't be angry with me, but I think this is a question about nothing. This is not happening. Has China stated that it is intending to solve the Taiwan problem militarily? It hasn't happened for many years. China has been developing its relationship with Taiwan. There are different assessments. China has its own assessment. The U.S. has a different assessment. Taiwan has its different assessment of the situation. But fortunately, it hasn't come to a military clash.
I'm being told to wrap up, but if I could just ask you a couple more questions. Our own Andrea Mitchell saw just this month the last border crossing into Syria, where supplies literally keep people alive. You're threatening to close that crossing in July at the Security Council. Why would you do that, knowing that it will cause the death of refugees?
Послушайте, там, к сожалению, очень много и так трагедий.
Unfortunately, there are a great deal of tragedies there already, and all our actions in our totality need to be geared at stabilizing that situation and bringing it into a normal course. And with support of Russia, the Syrian authorities have been able to bring back under their control over 90% of the Syrian territory. What needs to be set up now is just humanitarian assistance to people, irrespective of any kind of political context. But our partners in the West in general, both the U.S. and Europeans, have been saying that they are not going to give help to Assad. What does Assad have to do with it? Help out people who need that assistance, just the most basic things. They won't even lift restrictions on supplies of medications and medical equipment, even in the context of the coronavirus infection. But that is just not humane. And this kind of cruel attitude to people cannot be explained in any way. As far as the border crossings, there is the area where combatants are still robbing people, killing people, raping people. There is nothing's happening. There is the Etanf zone, which, by the way, is controlled by U.S. military. Recently, there we caught a group of gangsters, bandits, who had come from there, and they directly said that they had specific goals and targets as far as Russian military facilities. As far as border crossings, Our position is such that assistance needs to be given, just like as it should be done in the entire world, as it is provided for in the provisions of international humanitarian law. Assistance should be given through the central government. It shouldn't be discriminated upon or against. And if one assumes that the central government of Syria will plunder something, well, set up observers on the part of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent, control everything, oversee everything. I don't think that anybody in the Syrian government is interested in stealing some part of this humanitarian assistance. It just needs to be done through the central government, and in this sense, we support President Assad, because a different mode of behavior would be undermining the sovereignty of the Syrian Arab Republic, and that's all. As far as the Idlib zone, the Turkish troops there effectively control the border between Turkey and Syria, and convoys cross the border without any restrictions in both directions.
Mr. President, you extended the Constitution so that you could be president of Russia until 2036. Do you worry that the longer you are in power and without any sign of someone to replace you, the more instability there may be when you finally do choose to leave office?
А что обрушится в одночасье?
What
Смотрите,
will collapse overnight? If we look at the situation in which Russia was in the year 2000, where it was balancing on the brink of preserving its territorial integrity and sovereignty, the number of individuals below the poverty line was colossal, was catastrophic. The GDP level had dropped below anything that's acceptable. Our FX and gold reserves were 12 billion, whereas our foreign debt was 120 billion, if we count it in dollars. Now there are many other problems. The situation is completely different. Of course, somebody will come and replace me at some point. Is all of this going to collapse? We've been fighting international terrorism. We have nipped it in the bud. Is it supposed to come back to life? I don't think so. Another matter is that on the political scene, different people can emerge with different points of view. Great, very good. You know, I have linked my entire life to my entire fate, to the fate of my country, so tight that there isn't a more meaningful goal in my life than the strengthening of Russia. If anybody else, and if I see that person, even if that person is critical of some areas of what I have been doing, if I can see that this is an individual who has constructive views, that he or she is committed to this country and is prepared to sacrifice his entire life to this country, no matter his personal attitude to me, I will make sure I'll do everything that so that such people will get support. It is a natural biological process. At some point, someday, we will all be replaced, and you will be replaced at where you are, I will be replaced at where I am, but I am confident that the fundamental pillar of the Russian economy and statehood and its political system will be such that Russia will be firmly standing on its feet and look into the future confidently. He could take another question.
And would you look from that person for some kind of protection the same way that you offered to Boris Yeltsin when you took over?
я даже не думаю об этом.
I am not even thinking about that. These are third-tier
It's added to the liquidity pool because this just popped up to 61,000 in the AMM. Let me refresh this. I want to see how many holders we got.
Very good.
Brand new all-time high. Brand new all-time high. This thing's about to drop a zero right now.
Really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
sir.
It was a really interesting conversation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. President, it's been a long time since you sat down with an American television network, almost 3 years.